Hello and welcome, everybody. So my name is Steven, and this is the show where we bring together HR experts to break down some of the most fundamental topics in HR. And today our topic is paid time off. It's everybody's favorite topic. We have with us three amazing panelists who are going to break this topic down for us. We've got Heenal Turner, the VP of Content and Consulting at the All In Company. We've got Joy Banfield, who is the VP of People Operations at Designity. And last but not least, we have Megan Lamberti, HR manager at Cahill Contractors. So I got the names right, more or less. They're written on the screen. So these three are awesome. We're excited to learn from them about paid time off. So let's jump into our first question here. And there might be a lot of business owners, HR pros, who are starting up the program for the first time. And they just want to know, do I have to do PTO? Is there a legal requirement? Is this more of like a voluntary benefit we're offering? Joy, I'd love if you could start us off in this conversation. Are companies obligated to offer paid time off?
So some of that depends on the state and how you classify time off. So there are some states that do require sick time, or there's also time. It just depends on, really, you got to go to your state. That's how to start. But when I think of paid time off, though, I think of more the voluntary benefit that employers offer to really make it a better place to work, create a better work-life balance, that sort of thing. But really, to take it down, check your state before deciding whether you're required to offer time off.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we'll launch the rest of our conversation really into that benefits category. So it's something voluntary you're offering. And so Heenal and Megan, I want to hear your thoughts now on. Joy was starting to go into the benefits, right, of having a voluntary policy. What do you two see as some of the reasons that, especially a small business, would want to offer PTO?
Sure, I can jump in first here. I think first and foremost, for recruitment, I think it probably be pretty hard to find employees to come work for you if there wasn't some time off included in that package. And then also retention for employees. Everyone has a lot going on outside of work, obligations that they have, and we all need a break. I mean, there's so many articles these days about burnout and how companies can help avoid that. Really easy way to do that is to have one of these policies in place.
Yeah. Heenal, what would you add to that? I know especially you do a lot of work in recruiting and sort of talent management. What are you seeing on the benefits of PTO policies?
To echo Megan's point about how valuable, benefits are in the recruiting process, especially in this market, we're looking at, we need to make sure as an employer, you are competitive. And one of the first things I don't know if it's one of the first things, but one of the things that people look at certainly is what benefits we are offering. And one of those, the key ones is time off, right? And I get it. I mean, I don't want to work 365 days a year. I don't want to work 80 hours. Let me tell you that much, right? I need time off to relax and kick back. And I have two small kids. I need to see them, right? So actually I need them to be at daycare and I need to be at home by myself, but I still need time to do that. And the way I'm going to be able to do that is through my paid time off. So like So one thing is it provides such a great work-life balance, and it's such an advantage for you to be able to provide that. And I think to Joy's point, you do have to consider what your state and even your local requirements are to assess how much paid time off, if any, you can offer. So work-life balance is a must. And I mean, especially specifically for PTO, I mean, if you're offering a PTO, for your sick and your vacation, people are going to be gone from work. So we want to encourage it. We want it to be planned, and we can better plan for absences, usually with a policy in place.
Yeah. And we're going to get into the specific policies in a second, talk about how much is too much, how much is too little, how these policies can work so they stand out. and are effective. But Joy, I want to give you just one last opportunity. If there's anything else you wanted to add on, make the passionate case for why companies should have a strong PTO policy. What benefits would they see?
Yeah, I think it's, again, just to echo, it's that work-life balance. It's critical. There's so many articles out there right now on it, and it's expected. I can't, I can't remember anybody I've talked to when recruiting that didn't fully expect to have some sort of PTO policy. It's just really standard. And if you don't have something like that, if you don't have something in place that allows your employees to go and unplug, then you're going to stand out, and not in a great way.
Yeah.
So when building out, especially small businesses, when building out, you have to not only think about how you're going to do it, but also why you're going to do it, and then how you're going to support your employees so they actually take advantage of it.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the actual specific policies now, because I think we've laid a good case for why HR and businesses in general should be thinking about this. We actually already have an audience question in around an unlimited time off policy, which I want to hit at a little bit later, because I think it's like a lot to say about it. But stick around and we'll cover that in a second. But let's cover some other more traditional policies first. And so the way we're going to go about this, I'm just going to name a policy, and maybe we'll just go, one person at a time. You can just give a little definition of the policy and what you kind of see as some of the pros and cons of implementing a policy like this. The first one I have here is banked PTO, which I think some people also call traditional PTO policy. Megan, could you cover that one for us?
Sure. It's like a really quick kind of definition of this is PTO. So you start, your first day, you get your 2 weeks, on your anniversary date that got replenished, or the first of the year. And I think for a smaller company, in some ways that could be super simple, because you don't have to track all different, when someone started, and like different, like for accrual, you kind of know it's like this amount that someone's getting. But I think a hard part about this, or at least in California, we're paid out our vacation. So if someone starts January 1st, they get their 2 weeks, or they leave January 31st, you got to pay that out. So that's something to consider. But I think also a positive is sometimes you start a new job and you have vacations planned, like that next month you have a wedding or an event, and you can't miss it, and you had that time available to use, and don't have to wait that time to accrue more time off.
Awesome. Let's talk about accrual based PTO policies now. Hino, you want to cover that one for us?
Sure. So being a fellow California native, I live and breathe our accrual policies. And so an accrual policy is really where you earn the hours that you have off based on the hours that you work, or based on, maybe you can set it up on a week or a monthly cadence, but usually it's going to be tied to like your payroll or something. So I accrue 3 hours every 2 weeks, something like that. And I can use, usually in those cases, an employee can use the balance that they have available. Some great things about that is I think as an employee, you understand, oh, wow, like there is, like this is another thing that I'm gaining in addition to my wages, I'm gaining time off. So maybe that helps them from, an employee standpoint to understand that it does have a cost associated with it, and there's a total value associated with that. So that's a really fun area. It's also very fair. So it's a very consistent across the board for employees. So as HR people love that. So we can tell you, yep, everyone's accruing at the same rate. Or, maybe the rate changes after you give more service. So again, it's a very universal, very fair policy. Unless you get creative business owners, but typically it's a very fair policy. Some downfall there is, if I start working and I want to take time off for, say, this happened at my own wedding. I started in April or in February at my last job, and then I had my bachelorette party in April and my wedding in June. I was like, look, I'm not going to be here.
Yeah.
Right, that's the end of it, right? So is it going to be a paid or unpaid thing? Like, that was a little bit frustrating to have to think about that. But, and in some cases too, some employers will only allow people to take off time if they have a balance accrued. So if I didn't have a balance accrued, does that mean I'm going to miss my wedding? Probably not. But a contemplation, a conundrum people will face. And with, so those are probably some of the top advantages and disadvantages of both. But if you have more questions around that, certainly send them in the chat.
Yeah, send them in. We'll go over them. Great overviews there. Joy, I want to kick one over to you. Mandatory PTO. Have you heard of a policy like that before? I feel like that's kind of a newer one. What are your thoughts or feelings on something like that?
Yeah, I think you're seeing more and more of those as more articles are coming out on employee burnout. It's one of the things that companies are doing to intentionally combat it, and also to stand out and say we want our employee, right? It's a good recruiting tactic, retention tactic. We want our people to be taking their time off, so you have to take off so much time in a given year. I have not studied any of those policies in depth, but I definitely know you're seeing a lot more of them. Even people are putting them in their job advertisements as something to really stand out or break the mold a little bit of why we go above and beyond in the sense that we require and expect our employees to take time, shut down, recharge, come back.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely like a new and emerging one, but sounds like it could really help you stand out. Before we jump to unlimited PTO and start talking about that, the three that we've discussed so far are there's a set amount of days. So I want to spend a second just talking about what's the right number, and how do you arrive at that? Megan, do you want to kick us off on this, and then maybe Joy as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really hard question to answer. I think a little bit depends on your industry, the kind of work that you're doing. I think that kind of plays a part, into it. I think back in the day, the 2 weeks is kind of what we were seeing. And my personal opinion, I think that's a little bit old school. Now people start at 2 weeks. I mean, for me, I know I have family across the country. That's like a week there, and then it really doesn't give much other time to do much else. So I think from starting, and again, to be depending who your competitors are and kind of people you're recruiting, I think starting at least 3 to 4 weeks is kind of what I'm seeing out there.
Yeah, and when you say 3 to 4 weeks, by the way, are you meaning so five days is like a week?
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
It's like 15 to 20 days a year.
20. Cool. And does that count holidays, or holidays are kind of on top of that probably?
Usually holidays are counted separately, and I think usually 9, 10 kind of those common holidays that federal holidays that we see, and it seems like they keep adding more.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Joy, anything you'd add on that number?
Yeah, I definitely think just a straight 2 weeks is becoming a little bit outdated. It was the traditional, but more and more people are needing that extra time. I remember a conversation I had with one of my leaders talking about how 2 weeks it couldn't cut it if a family had a week in the summer and then a week at Christmas, and then what are they supposed to do if they need additional days off here and there? So I think really going to 3 weeks should be a good starting point at the very least now, and then on top of that to be competitive, or like Megan said, depending on your role in the industry, you see some of the more professional office roles tend to have even more and more time off that they add on top, whereas some of the production companies, it's harder to have a ton of time off in those industries. So it really can vary, but to stay competitive, I think it's really got to be more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, I love some of the principles you guys are bringing out there. Just staying competitive, look at your industry, and just try to stay competitive. Let's jump right into this audience question now then around unlimited PTO, because unlimited is a lot more than 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. It's 52 weeks, right? So I'll just read the question. This is such a hot topic right now. Some leading firms have offered unlimited time off. What are your opinions on this? Hino, I want to give you the first thought on this, and then Megan or Joy, whoever wants to jump in, more than welcome to.
Sure, yeah. So unlimited PTO, and I can just imagine like these are a little tricky, especially for us in California. But if we think beyond California, the way the unlimited PTO policy works is that that's exactly like it sounds. There's no set amount of time that the person is maxed out to take, and what ends up happening is the individual employee is requesting the time off, and the person who's approving it needs to be on their game. So they need to approve it consistently across the board, and they need to consider their scheduling. They need to consider the order of requests. They need to consider how many requests are coming in, and they have to be. This is the tough part. They have to be comfortable denying the request, because where it's going to be very difficult to approve every request every time. So those are some things to consider before you implement, something like a unlimited, PTO or vacation policy. Some areas where I've seen it's popular in is more in like a management level. I've seen it very popular with like sales professionals. It just has to do a lot with how their payment is scheduled, really, like, and their classification as a salaried employee makes doing this a little easier. Another thing I would also consider is how does that interact with your leave laws? So if someone is taking an FMLA, CFRA, or any other kind of leave, and are you going to put yourself in a position where you need to pay somebody for the entirety of their leave? So very kind of nitty gritty things, but it ends up being an interesting discussion. And I've seen it work successfully in organizations, even those in California, because most people do not take advantage of it, is what I've found. But they see it, the impression that it leaves with your employees is that you're such a generous company, and I have an unlimited PTO policy. It's awesome. So I don't know about any of you, but it initially, at least, it was harder for me to take time off, right? So I feel like that's a very common feeling. So love to hear your thoughts, Meg and Joy.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's funny because I feel like companies were we had that everyone wanted to know, but how many weeks should I take? It's like I think employees wanted that like number, but it was like almost like too open. I think sometimes because they don't want to be that employee who's taking too much, but then they don't know because it's unlimited, or they're scared to ask for it all because they don't know. So I think there has to be some kind of like left and right guidance around it.
Yeah, because I don't want someone to be, not comfortable asking, so then they never get time off. Like that would be unfortunate. Yeah.
I honestly think that one of the ways to combat that sort of thing is they have to see leadership also taking advantage of these policies. Yeah. The leaders need to be taking advantage of these policies in order to have employees feel comfortable and confident taking the time they need to rest and recharge. But unlimited policies, they have to be complicated. You have to put boundaries around them, and then they have to be done fairly. The thing that I find really, really interesting is it seems to be something that is considered a great benefit by employees when looking for opportunities or when considering joining a company. But there's also a pretty good benefit for the employer that the employees don't necessarily realize. And that's something that you have to take into account too, is when you're building an unlimited PTO policy, there's no accruals. And when there's no accruals, then PTO is not an earned thing, so there's no payout when somebody leaves. So I've seen companies make shifts to these policies so they can get accrued time off the books. And then there's not those accruals on the books that are costly to employers. So you really have to look at both sides of the coin here. Yes, it's nice in theory when you talk about it, but is it really something that is for the employees, or is it something that's for the company?
Yeah. Yeah, such a fascinating topic. I know we could come back and talk about it probably for the balance of the conversation. If the audience has more specific questions, feel free to bring those up. I'm actually going to take a pause here from some of the sort of topics we have scheduled just to address some audience questions. Just because, Joy, you just brought this up around payouts. So is there a better way to handle unused PTO? For example, paying out on January 1st or carrying the balance forward? Oh, so this is more about from year to year. I wonder if paying it out would promote better attendance. So I'll keep this open. Is there somebody who wants to jump in and has a thought on this question?
I've seen different ways of handling this sort of thing. Again, you got to go to your state laws. Some states require that you allow the balance to carry forward. Other states don't, and those what we used to call use or lose policies do still exist in some states. But I've also seen a really successful program where we did allow people almost to sell back their PTO at the end of the year. So up to 40 hours a week, we had employees who were able to trade in their PTO for cash, basically, which gave them a great bump at the end of the year. So there's definitely some creative ways to come up with solutions that really are positive and benefit the employees.
Yeah.
One more creative solution to add to that is you can have a program where you allowed it you may consider donating it. So we had it wasn't at my job, but at my husband's job, they had somebody who was out sick for an extended period of time due to a long-term illness, and so they had a lot of people in the company who were interested in donating a few days here and there, and so their company allowed it, which was great. And it kind of benefited everybody. I think, and I also love your idea of allowing a partial, maybe like a partial bank to carry forward or something, or payout. I've seen that work successfully too.
And one other quick thing on this, which I think one thing to remember too is like, the reason that you have this voluntary PTO policy in place too is for people to take that break to rest and recharge, right? Because if like, if you don't take any vacation, you get this money that people might be coming to, if sick in that, coming to work sick or not taking that break and then super burned out. I think it's something just to consider as well.
Yeah. So you do want them to take it as much as possible.
Right.
There's definitely benefits there. Great. I think is great ideas around how to handle unused. We got one other question we'll cover now, and then we'll keep moving through some of our other topics. How negotiable should PTO be when you're negotiating the offer? And I want to tack on actually kind of an additional question to this, which is, do you have different policies for different roles, for different departments, for different people on the same team? Is that end up working out or not? But how would you answer Rachel's question? Joy, maybe we'll give you the first stab at this if you have a thought.
Great. I honestly, it's frustrating for recruiters because it's thinking outside the box, but I've also seen that be successful. And there have been times that I've not only, worked with candidates to negotiate it at offer stage, but I've even worked with internal people who use it to negotiate when getting a promotion as well. So, instead of the increase in base or percentage, they want another week off. And I have seen that be really successful and people be happy with it. So some of that negotiation is all around what the candidate values the most. And some people really do value that time off and they need it and they know themselves enough about that. And I think it's something that can be used. Is it fun for the HR professional? Not necessarily, but I think it can be really beneficial for the employees to use it some when negotiating a job offer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. And I think too, especially in this market when, people are the employees have their, pick their buffet of choices, right? And so they're going to ask for whatever they can ask for. I've seen it traditionally a little bit more common at like an executive level when you're negotiating PTO. But I feel like, to your point, Joy, it's going to be so important to understand what your candidate is looking for. So are they looking for to spend more time with their family? Can you offer like a bonus and keep like the policy as is? Or, do you need to consider offering a different like tier of PTO for, management level versus, an entry level position versus like the executive team. So it's certainly taking the time to look at everything all together and seeing, maybe different levels of PTO does make sense. I think especially for like an executive or management level candidates today.
Yeah.
I think one thing to consider too, I think we're going to talk about tracking in a few minutes, but depending on what kind of system you have to track, if it's something that's not like automated, having all these different weeks and different roles and changes, it can get, very messy and very confusing very fast.
Yeah. So real implementation issues with the policy, maybe. Great. I think lots of great tips for that one. And I think, Megan, let's go ahead and move together into kind of more of the tracking, the implementation of a policy. But I guess one second before we get there is we did go over those 4 policies. Are there any other creative policies that you've heard that you think you'd want to bring up? No pressure if there's not another like PTO fancy PTO policy name that we haven't discussed. Megan?
Not really like a policy per se, but I've seen companies, do like your birthday off or your anniversary off, that extra day or two a year for employees.
Yep.
I've heard of too volunteer time off, where they let you go volunteer.
Right. Yeah, the volunteer time off is we've had that volunteer time off, or and then you have I think you can get really creative with your holidays. You can offer like a flex schedule altogether, half day Fridays. I worked with a company once where they wanted to give every a Friday one holiday every month at least. And so we were like, okay, let's do Star Wars Day, like let's find a holiday, right? And so it worked.
Well, that's cool. I mean, that seems like a really interesting way to reinforce the culture of the organization and give them some unique experiences. So those are cool. Joy, anything you wanted to add? Any creative things you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did something similar. We called them floating holidays, and people could use them for birthdays or to tack on and extend a holiday weekend that you're already taking and really just boost out the policy a little bit. And then the positive thing was when you build a policy like that, it's for everyone, but it does not add to the accrual bank. So it doesn't hit the books the same way, which makes it easier. So I think the more flexible you can be from the financial perspective when building those sorts of things can really be positive for both the company and the employee.
Yeah. Well, I'm starting to get a feel for this kind of tension between you want it to be a really flexible policy on the one hand, because that's what employees want. And on the other hand, you have business needs. You need your employees there at certain times. So I want to talk a little bit about tracking, kind of we're going in that direction. And just start out with a conversation around what advice would you give to a manager around, when should you let people or not let people do, take time off? I know in retail, for example, the holiday season gets really busy. Right. So there's examples like that. Kino, would you want to maybe start us off on this
Sure.
one?
Yeah. So like I would, I always kind of think, well, first, like, let's look at your business overall. So like you need to consider what your business needs are. So if there is a time block, like a week or two, like if you're an accounting firm and people can't take time off during the tax season, like that makes sense, right? Because you need to keep your business moving forward. Holidays are like a cool fun time off. And I always like to let people, like everyone I think should be eligible for taking their holiday like right away. Like I don't feel like you need to have a waiting period for holiday, like certain other types of time off, like vacation and sick. Vacation and PTO, I usually like to have a little bit of a waiting period there. So like a 60-day or like a 90-day waiting period, kind of depending on your size and how you choose to manage the PTO. Sick, me personally, I think, you need to instill it that, you understand when you set the stage correctly, right? People get sick all the time, especially people with, especially children, right? So you go in there and you're telling it, we don't want you to come to work sick. We want you to rest, recover, and get better. So, what you can use your sick immediately. And we just don't want, of course, the fear is that people are going to abuse that. But that's usually how I like to set it up. Sick with sick and holiday with no waiting period, vacation PTO with some sort of 90-day waiting period.
Yeah. Megan, weird situation for you. Let's say your whole team requests PTO off on the same day. You're in California. They want to go to Disneyland. So they're all gone. All these requests are hitting your desk at the same time. Like, how should a manager handle that? I mean, in theory, the policy is that they can do that, right? Or do you put stipulations around someone needs to be there on the shift or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, I think again, like the culture type of work that your company is doing, but usually not a good thing for the whole team to be out at the same time. So I think kind of how I would handle 3 employees kind of like figuring out maybe who took off time last kind of next year, how we can make it fair. Like you got day before around Christmas off, you got Thanksgiving, kind of break it up so it's fair in that way, which I think is why it is good to have some kind of a policy written. I think sometimes when it is so loosey goosey, people can kind of not understand what's expected of them and can get upset. But I think really kind of reiterating like we're a team here working together, and we kind of need to sometimes take one for the team, for all of us to get our jobs done.
Yeah. Joy, if you want, I'll let you have the last thought on just any limitations you would put on a policy to avoid situations like that.
Yeah, I think most companies will probably need some sort of blackout period, because I mean, I've worked in retail, I've worked in production, I've worked in convenience stores. Like you have to have some blackout periods during the really busy season, because you just simply can't afford to have everybody out. So I've seen that. I've also seen successfully setting boundaries, like no more than 25% of the team can be out at a given time, sort of thing. And then one way
real quick, sorry, a blackout period for the listeners, is that just nobody can take time off?
Okay. I've seen it both. I've seen blackouts and I've seen grayouts. So blackout periods, like in a system, literally you can be going in there trying to take time off, and because it's a blackout period, it's been set to that, you can't request the time off in the system. Grayout period, you can request it, but it always has to be like more critically reviewed by the manager, is how I've seen it when it's like automated in a payroll system. I've also seen one interesting way to work is if you base it on seniority and who can take what time off. So on a production floor, you have some people who've worked there for 30 years. Some people, have worked there for 2 months. So they have a book that they start at the beginning of the year, and say you get 2 weeks off. You start with the most tenured person, they put week 1 in, and then you go all the way around. And then you start and then you start over and they put in week 2, and you go all around. So there's different ways that you have to make sure that it's as equitable as possible. You're not playing favorites, but everyone is getting equal opportunities. And if you decide to base it on seniority, there's some pretty structured ways you can do that.
Perfect. I think it's great guidance. Good guidance for the listeners at home. Hopefully they're taking notes. Let's move on now to the actual tools, because again, we're starting to bring up some pretty complicated policies and blackout and grayout, and the seniority is coming in the mix. So if you're doing this all on paper, it probably starts to get kind of difficult. Megan, I know you started to bring up tools. So I want to address that now. What should people be using to manage these PTO policies? Or should they just be using a spreadsheet or something? Go ahead. Yeah.
So I definitely work at those small companies where it's a spreadsheet or literally like a calendar, like throw your time off on here. And like, and to be honest, like that can work for like a little bit when you're a small company, but at a certain point, it kind of gets unruly and just sometimes PTO changes and tracking, and especially like you mentioned earlier in states where you're paying out, you want to make sure you're accurately have that information. And there's so many tools out there. A lot of them are not that expensive either. There's a lot kind of PTO time tracking that are connected to either like a payroll system you might be using or an HRIS system. And sometimes it's like a separate, option, like a buy add-on option for them, but usually it's not too expensive. And having something like that at the start or early on will save a lot of headaches as you know to go back and track. And it makes it really simple too for like as HR or even like management, they can see like the system I use, it's for the construction industry, but I can go on and see this week everyone who's out, around the holidays who's out. So you kind of get a high level view of, who's in and who's out. And then also for managers approving it. So like our policy as a manager has to approve your vacation time off. So really quickly, I put my request in, my manager gets the email, he approves, done. It's, my time's in there. It's not always like back and forth with emails and saving emails. So again, there's so many tools out there. If I find one that works with the tools that you're already using.
Yeah. Great. Hino, anything you'd add there or specific tools that you've seen that seem to work well?
I would say it's going to go back to, I think the easiest way to do it is through your payroll system. So like I've not come across a payroll company that doesn't have an integrated time off tracker. So of course I used to work at Paycheck, so I'm familiar with that one, but I feel like they're across the board. I really like Gusto's, like that's who is another payroll company that's fairly easy to use. But yeah, I would say just check with your payroll company first or your time tracking, time tracker. I feel like you clock in and off.
Yeah. I agree though. There's a lot out there. I mean, I specifically work at an HR tech company, and we have like a PTO thing too. And yeah, I mean, everyone has it. And we do like an unlimited policy, right? And like I'll get the email just like you said, Megan. And it's actually kind of fun because it'll be like, oh, I'm going camping this week, and I'll just be like, okay, cool, good luck. But anyways, yeah, I think there's a lot of good stuff out there. That was the last major question we were going to address together. But we always like to give everyone a final opportunity to give their mic drop moment, right? Like best piece of advice. And so I want to be respectful of everybody's time and just kind of move into that now. But basically, the last question we have is, in a sentence or two, what is your final piece of advice for somebody who is maybe creating a PTO policy from scratch, right? Starting from the ground up. They've just listened to this whole conversation. Maybe they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, so much they need to track and think through. But let's start with you, Joy, and then we'll go to Hino, and we'll close with Megan. What's your last piece of advice?
Yeah, I'd say for starting one from scratch, best piece of advice is do research. Number one. And number two, if it's something that you're going to be offering, recognize that it's a benefit for your employees and something that if you're offering it, they are earning it, so they should be taking it. And like remember the why when you're building out a policy. And it's to take care of your employees and to give them time. So those would be my two pieces of advice. Research it. There's lots on there that you can find, and set boundaries, and then remember the why.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And I also would say like definitely look at some sample policies, like look at 2 or 3 different sample policies. You can find so many on the internet. You could probably reach out to one of us on LinkedIn, and we're happy to be a resource for you. and then think about what you can kind of afford, from a company standpoint, and really re-emphasizing the point of setting boundaries and being consistent.
Definitely, just to add one other thing. I think we kind of may mention this during the call today, but I think to really think about your company's culture and what works. Like, you might see an article came out, this company is doing this, like that's great for them, but really thinking about what works for your people, the type of company that that you are, as well as to look at kind of like state where you are, city, making sure you're following all of those, but also really thinking about what benefits of people, because at the end of the day, it's a benefit for them.
Yeah. Well, great advice from these three. So awesome to have you. If you want to learn a little bit more about PTO, this video will actually be posted at the top of our encyclopedia entry on paid time off. Also in the encyclopedia, we have entries on most of the policies and some of kind of the key terms we discussed in here if you want to go a little bit deeper. So go ahead and check those out. And more than anything, meet these three people. Go on LinkedIn. They're awesome. Get to know them. Again, very generous. I'm sure if you reached out and asked them a question, they'd be willing to help you out. But so grateful that you three could be here. We hope that you and everyone watching at home has an awesome 3-day weekend that includes some paid time off, right? Yeah, we'll see you next time. Everybody.